Hello and welcome to today's webinar, California Reserve Study Updates 2026, Adapting to Change. This webinar is sponsored by Association Reserves. My name is Paige Showerman, and I'm the Marketing Manager for Association Reserves, and I'll be serving as your moderator for today. California Reserve Study Updates 2026, Adapting to Change is a 45-minute webinar designed to help HOA board members and community managers understand the evolving landscape of reserve study requirements and strategies in California. In this session, we'll highlight the most important updates to Reserve Study Standards for 2026, including changes prompted by SB 326, SB 900, and SB 1007. We'll also explore how to adapt to today's financial pressures, such as California's fire insurance crisis, and how to respond proactively to the challenges of aging infrastructure and community sustainability goals. Our goal today is to equip you with the knowledge and tools to ensure your reserve study aligns with both current regulations and long-term financial resilience. Whether it's compliance, risk management, or strategic planning, this webinar will provide the clarity you need to move your community forward with confidence. Due to the number of participants today, everyone has been muted, but we welcome your questions. So please go ahead and type them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your control panel. Not the chat box, but the Q&A box. We'll reserve the last 5 to 10 minutes of today's session to answer as many of your questions as we can. This webinar is approved by the Community Association Managers International Certification Board, CAM-ICB, for 1 CE credit toward the CMCA certification. Certificates of completion will be emailed within 1 week. Please remember that your time on the webinar is tracked for certification purposes, so stay logged in for the full session. Okay, our hosts today are Sean Anderson and Derek Eckert. Derek is the president of our San Francisco office. Derek is also a highly experienced reserve specialist who has worked with residential, resort, and business clients throughout the United States. Derek's approach emphasizes clear communication and empowering board members to make confident, informed funding decisions that protect and sustain their properties. Sean Anderson is the president of our Orange County, Inland Empire, and Coachella Valley office. Sean is known for his practical, solution-oriented approach and deep understanding of funding challenges facing communities across California. He has guided hundreds of boards and managers through the reserve study process with clarity and confidence. And now I'd like to turn the floor over to Derek.
Thank you, Paige. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We have some news we would like to share with you. Sean and I are going to just have general conversation around some of the new bills and potential pending bills and legislation that would have impact on reserve funding and what your reserve study might look like moving forward. I always tell our clients that reserve studies are living, breathing documents. And as you gather and have more information at your fingertips, you need to make adjustments to your study just to make sure that your roadmap is still pointing at the correct destination. So today, Sean and I are going to highlight SB 1007, which is essentially going to put a cap potentially on annual assessment increases of 8%. Some hot off the press news about that one, Sean and I will share. We're going to touch on SB 326. This is balconies and elevated structures that need to be inspected every 9 years. That's been a law that's been in place for condo associations for a number of years now, but still very impactful to your reserve study. We're going to touch on SB 900, which identifies the need for utilities and emergency funding, things like electrical systems, plumbing, sewer lines. AB 1572, which puts a ban on non-functional turf. We'll touch on that and what that means to your reserve study. Something that's pending is AB 2050. It's going to reform reserve funding and make sure that associations have cash flow programs set up so that they have the ability to avoid special assessments. And then finally, we're going to close it out with some new lending requirements, Fannie and Freddie. This is new information and it goes into effect in early January of 2027. So, Sean, let's start with the new news.
Yeah, it's great news that I woke up this morning to an email from CAI about that SB 1007 was taken off the calendar, so it's kind of lost some momentum, which I think everybody in our industry is breathing a bit of a sigh of relief with that. Capping assessments at 8% really takes a lot of tools out of boards' toolboxes in order to make sure that the association is well run and well maintained. And what it would result in is massive special assessments and constant special assessments. So I'm really pleased that this was pulled. It's delayed, it's not dead, so we got to keep up the conversation. But that was a really welcome development this morning.
Yeah, Sean, it's just kind of the nature of what it is we do. We're here to make sure that boards and homeowners associations are funded adequately, and oftentimes they're underfunded. And we do need to recommend that they increase their reserve contributions. And so, what they do is they set their operating budget first, and things like insurance premiums are continuing to go up and up and up fast. Operating expenses are going up fast. And then they think about us last. They think about funding reserves. And it's not uncommon for us to make recommendations to increase reserves by more than 8%,
Yep.
sometimes as much as 20 or 25%, which is potentially allowable based on what their operating increases are. But this would really limit our ability to work with our clients and make sure that they have enough cash when needed to take care of their capital needs moving forward.
Yes. Yeah, I think again, this is good news. I think we're going to see a lot less special assessments than we otherwise would have. So I'm very pleased to see this.
Mhm. And we kind of touched on what's on this slide here, but I agree with you. They would need a lot of emergencies to fund for their needs moving forward, projects that we can easily predict. But sometimes it's hard to get the cash momentum in front of them to take care of them. Things like roofs, you and I know that roofs last 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
Um, but there's a lot of pressures that boards have on them to make funding decisions. And if they were limited to only being able to increase total assessments by 8%, that would continuously put pressure on boards to maybe not make the best decisions.
Yeah, I have a very proactive board here that has already they always go to worst case scenarios on these things, and they were already planning on doing the 5% special assessment that the board could do no matter what going forward. That was then going to be baked in the cake rather than just doing normal updates. So yeah, it just I think that this was a very arbitrary number of grabbing that 8%, and I'm glad that it seems to be being rethought now.
Yeah, Sean, you just brought up an excellent point. Maybe the audience doesn't know, but the homeowner association boards are already limited to what they can increase total assessments at. And that number is 20%. That number has been in place for 20 plus years, maybe 30 years. And then alternatively, without the vote of membership, they can also pass a special assessment of up to 5%. Um, and so this is within their tool set that they can do to make sure that they have enough funds to take care of projects, not just on the reserve side, but on the operating side. But this bill, SB 1007, would further restrict them down to just an 8% increase per year.
Yeah, so good news.
Great news. All right. And moving on, SB 326, Civil Code 5551. This is a bill, legislation that's been in place for a lot of years now. We'll call it 5, 6 years. Um, and so as a requirement to inspect elevated decking surfaces. So think of cantilevered balcony decks that don't have any kind of living space beneath them, or walkways that join buildings. So you're at one building, you need to get to the next building. There's an elevated walkway system. So there was a requirement for any community, so condo communities that had more than 3 units and up of multifamily units, that they get an inspection every 9 years. And so some of the early adopters to these inspection requirements started getting inspections in 2020 or so. And the deadline was January 1st, 2025. So of our clients, all of them should be compliant now. But the reason why we bring this up is it's a 9-year cycle. So Sean, are any of your clients thinking
Oh
about
yeah.
it?
Yeah, another very proactive board that I work with. Interestingly, I spoke about the balcony bill. I believe it had to have been 2020, right before the COVID lockdowns, and that was when everything was up in the air, and everybody was trying to figure out how to comply with this and stuff. So I had a few clients that jumped on it right away and got their inspections done way back then and really hit the ground running. And now one of those associations is creeping up on, they've got a couple more years until it's due again. They're already scheduling for their next round of inspections. And they're anticipating that the inspection cost is going to be way lower because they've installed, places for cameras to go into the decks. They've done a ton of repairs. Now it's really going to be just a matter of steering the ship at this point. That they really did the heavy lifting way back when, and now they're kind of just going to be doing updates and making sure everything's aging normally.
I have a number of clients that installed hatch-like door systems underneath their deck systems so they can open them up, they could get in, they could literally put their head in there. But to your point, more they're likely putting a camera system in there and probing and understanding what's going on under those decks. So this next time around, I anticipate the inspection itself being less expensive, but also the findings. So after the inspection, the reports came out and they found a certain amount of deficiencies and they
Hmm.
needed to repair them. And for most of the clients, it had been 30 years since, origination, basically.
Yeah.
They looked into doing work on their decks. And so they found a lot of issues and it was expensive. But next go around, it will only have been 9 years since inspection and repairs. So our anticipation is it's going to be much less expensive this next go around than it was the first time.
And it's gonna and also they're gonna be more prepared, right? Because we've been including the inspections in the reserve study, and we've been funding for repairs in the reserve study. So it's just going to be a much more smooth transition going forward that because it came out of nowhere before. And now we've had years to prepare for it. Communities understand that they have to do it, and they've been hopefully funding for the inspections and the repairs since they've completed them.
Yeah. Sean, what I found in my experience was the early adopters maybe paid a little bit more for the inspection because they were figuring it out. Who inspects? How do you inspect? How many of the decks do you inspect? Then about 2022, 2023, economies of scales really kicked in. There was companies and professionals that were able to inspect and they were able to do it really well, really efficiently. So the price kind of came down. Then anyone that didn't do it came up against a deadline, and then it got expensive fast. So if you were trying to do your inspections in 2024, there weren't enough service providers to do it, so it got expensive. What I like about this next go around is those same experts are going to be around, and they're going to have the ability to schedule it out and program it in. And so I think it's going to be less expensive to do these inspections and do them the right way too, moving forward.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on.
Yep.
All right. So SB 900. This is legislation that went into play last year. It provides boards the power to pass emergency special assessments to take care of utilities. These are things like your electrical systems, gas, water, supply lines, and then sewer lines that take the wastewater away. Um, and so we've been advising our association clients to get inspections, get experts involved early on, because this was infrastructure maybe that we didn't really include in reserve studies 20 some odd years ago. But as these communities aged, we're now starting to find out that sewer laterals last 50, 60 years. And guess what? A lot of community associations were built 40, 50 years ago. And so there's a real need for understanding the needs of this infrastructure and or when things go wrong, how the boards fix it. So this is legislation that helps support their ability as a board to be active and take care of the problems.
Yeah, I love it that this kind of ties into our previous conversation too with inspections and funding for them and stuff like that. Remember, the National Reserve Study Standards changed so that we could start including these kinds of inspections and repairs. So it came together very well for our California clients that we want to start having these subject matter experts inspecting these utilities and giving us an idea of what's coming at us with that. And so in our reserve studies here in my territory, what we've been doing is having a utility line in the reserve study. And because the law is pretty nebulous, we just went ahead and have just made a line there to make sure that we're funding for this bill so that so the boards can then use reserves to do the repairs and also use reserves to do the inspections with subject matter experts so that they know exactly what's going on with their utilities.
Yeah. Just wanted to let the audience know that Sean and I are reserve study experts. We do general inspections, it's visual, but we're not scoping your, sewer laterals or your water lines, and we're not testing your electrical systems. We're relying on information from the board and your subject matter experts to help us make the reserve study better. Again, it's a living, breathing document. So if you have knowledge, we just look for you to share that knowledge with us so that we can accurately set up your funding plan accordingly within the reserve study.
Yeah, it's constant conversation so that we create this great future together for your community.
And Sean, I don't really have clients where I'm funding for full replacement of any of these systems, not just yet. Do you have any?
No, and frankly, we've never seen it. You know, I have one client that replaced their entire electrical system, and it was a building built in the 1920s, and even there, it was because of premature deterioration on things. So, um, I I haven't seen that happen. So that's why we've been leaning much more into the annual allowances for repairs and stuff like that, and then subject matter expert um, inspections.
Mm. Sean, you brought up a good point. I'm in San Francisco proper, and a lot of the buildings and developments were built out just after the 1906 earthquake. So they're 120 years old now,
Yeah.
and maybe a little bit less. And some of the electrical systems are obsolete, right? So I don't know that I've built in a program where they're replacing their full electrical system completely, but huge, massive parts of it, right? Like the electrical mains, the sub panels, But again, we're working with these experts as this information comes around. And Sean, just now kind of circling back to what you mentioned earlier, giving allowances and pointing the client in the right direction is, I think, the correct medicine for them moving forward, at least at this point in time.
Yeah, I think so too. We want to make sure we're giving them a realistic plan. We don't want to give them a plan that's shooting for these giant numbers that aren't realistic, that, really kind of violate National Reserve Study standards too for funding as well. So yeah, I think the process we've adopted is a good one.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on to the next one, AB 1572. So this is non-functional turf and then the usage of the water. What it does, and here's the deadline here on screen. So January 1st, sorry about that, guys. Let me move right back. January 1st, 2029, our HOA clients need to be compliant. And so the areas that it's identifying is this non-functional turf. So think about medians and green belts and lawns that are just turfed out, just grass, right? Um, Parking lot islands is another one. And so I've historically seen a lot of these areas when visiting our association clients, and that's got to change based on this bill. What's excluded, what's okay, is turf that are for sports fields, storm flood control areas, although usually I see those as bioswales and they use a different type of vegetation. Um, and then pet play areas, think of like a little dog park or a dog run. That's allowable. You can still have those be turfed. Um, Sean, what's your experience? How are you tackling this for your clients?
So we are working with clients on this too, that because the deadline is 2029, we still have time. So what we've been working with people to do is do a phased plan. We want to make sure that we have a phased plan going forward so that they're compliant in the next few years. And so again, that's going to be another matter of conversation with us and boards of what's your plan to be compliant with this. And a lot of our clients are being proactive and saying, well, look, we've got 3 years to be compliant, and they've started this phased plan so that by 2029, it just drops off at that point that we would no longer be funding for it.
Yeah, I would say at least 90%, if not more, of the clients that we're already setting up components for, programs for, to comply with AB 1572 are phasing it out. So they're saying we're going to tackle a certain amount of these areas in year one, certain amount in year two, certain amount in year three. Um, and so again, remember we talked about the balcony bill getting really expensive, inspections getting expensive when the deadline came about. If you're an association that's not hyper focused on planning ahead, then you're going to get hit with huge amount to take care of these projects when the deadline comes about. Um,
Oh,
one,
I agree. I was also going to say just to because I'm a reserve analyst nerd. We also need to factor in that not only is it going to get more expensive because people are going to be doing it more. Think of how much labor costs have gone up in California and how much they're going to continue to go up over the next 3 years. If you don't have a plan for this, you're really taking big steps backwards. You've really got to have a plan and start getting that money in the ground now and start your plan. Otherwise, you're going to be spending top dollar in 3 years.
yeah, one perk I've identified and noticed with the clients is there's a lot of rebates out there. So you
Yeah.
want to work with like your local utility or municipality. That's how you're getting these rebates. And they change. It just depends on where you're at, who your utility is. Um, when I speak of utility, I'm talking about like your water company. Um, and so if you can identify what that rebate is, it's a great idea to then communicate it back to us because we need to make sure that we are pricing the project appropriately. And Sean, unlike the balcony bill, I think once they do this project, they're done, right? Like they're not gonna have to do it again. Not the whole thing.
Yeah, it just drops off. And that's how we've been putting in the reserve studies. Once the phase is done, we put a terminate year on it and say, okay, it's done funding at this point. We're good going forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Here's a fun one. Okay. So Sean and I, we spend a lot of our adult life encouraging associations to fund appropriately. We want to try to minimize their risk and avoid the need for special assessments, deferred maintenance, make sure that their property values are protected. And so there's new legislation that's pending. So it's going through all the proper channels, and it's AB 2050. And what AB 2050 does is it is going to require associations at minimum to fund so that they're cash flow positive. Um, so Sean and I, we really believe in full funding. So the majority, if not all of our clients are set up on a full funding model um, that would exceed what these minimum standards are. But Sean and I, we make recommendations to our community associations, and the boards ultimately adopt their reserve program moving forward. So sometimes they don't follow our recommendations. And Sean, how often would you say that that is?
Um, Boy, well, um, actually, I would honestly say about 50 to 60% of our clients follow our full funding recommendation. Those that can't, what we would encourage is that they use our alternate funding contribution rate, which would keep them above zero. And so those clients will be compliant with that minimum funding rule should this bill completely pass. I don't know. How about your clients?
So my estimate is somewhere between 10 and 20%. So uh, you said 50 to 60% follow our full funding model. I agree with that.
Yeah.
And then another 20-ish percent would follow something beneath that, but would keep them cash flow positive. And then 10 to 20% of these clients maybe don't read the reserve study or
Yeah.
don't care or uh, think that they have a rich uncle and they can call them and get money
Yes.
when they need it. And so that's what this bill would be in place for. Those 10 to 20% of those clients that just ignore the reserve study, I think, and do what it is they want to do moving forward. Um, this bill is saying that no, you can't do that anymore. There's other members that belong to these community associations, and we need to protect them, and we need to make sure that they have enough cash moving forward. And we're going to give the boards more powers. And if you can't follow that program, then they're going to be able to pass a special assessment, and they need to do it within like a 9-year period to make sure that there's enough cash to take care of the expensive projects, the roofs, their balconies, their roadways, their siding, all the expensive stuff.
Yeah, and going back to our previous conversation about the 8% cap, that would have made this bill very interesting because that special assessment override would have been used very regularly. With these two bills, you know, they kind of conflict with each other, except this bill gives the mechanism that boards would be able to use to go ahead and fund reserves.
Yeah, you're right. Those are like polar opposite, those two bills. One restricts boards from being able to fund adequately, in theory, and the other gives them a lot of control and power to make sure that they're taking care of the community and making sure that they're not deferring projects and making sure that they have appropriate cash flow moving forward. So I'm personally a fan of AB 2050. It's got a lot of momentum. Everyone I've talked to says that it likely will pass. Um, I'm not such a fan of SB 1007.
Totally agree with you. I agree with you on both counts.
The good news, Sean, too, is they got time, right? So let's
Yeah.
say it does pass. Let's say it passes tomorrow. It won't pass tomorrow, but let's just say it passes soon. They have until January 1st, 2032 to be compliant. And so if you're already working with Sean or I or any of our other partners, we have the ability to work to try to avoid the need for you having this override to pass special assessments. We can do it with reserve contributions, which is the mechanism that Sean and I prefer to fund reserves with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And we talked a lot about us trying to encourage our association clients to fund adequately. Um, and I thought that this was just a nice slide that I had in another presentation, but I wanted to share with the audience what everyone else's funding levels are so you can kind of understand where you fall within, the norms. So in California, we looked at about 1,000 clients. These are my clients, not Sean's clients, but I assume that his array of clients would be the same.
Yeah.
So the average funding level is 50% here in California. It was 49.4%, or 0.6%. So 50% is the average, and about a third of the clients are underfunded. And we've had legislation in place that requires reserve studies in California since 1991, 91, Sean. So 30 years, or is that 30 years?
Oh, it's more than 30 years, 35 years.
35 years, okay. And there's also reserve funding disclosure requirements. So the boards can no longer say, hey, we made our decisions, we're not going to share. They have to share. They have to show the membership, what their funding is moving forward. So we make recommendations, the board adopts them, or makes their own decisions, and then they disclose to the membership. And what I would say is, the array is healthy. It's
Yeah.
generally directionally moving in the right direction. Theoretical is 100% funded. We do have some clients that are 100% funded. You would operate just finely if you were in this fair funding range, so 50%, 40%, 60% and above. And these clients are clients that we work with, and directionally we're trying to improve their funding levels. Um, but I think that on screen is what you get when you have excellent legislation that encourages reserve studies, proper reserve funding, mechanisms in place to, make sure that cash is available when needed. So I just wanted to share this with the audience.
Well, and Derek, just to put an exclamation point on what we talked about, we've kind of gone through the process and in discussing the bills of there's a lot of chaos that's gone on with the HOA world in the last year. But one of the things that I think this speaks well of is California associations are pretty well run for the most part. That we're, as you said, we're trending in the right direction. Not to throw another state under the bus, but we want to give people the Cliffs Notes version of the presentation you did with our Colorado office to see where we as California measures up in the association world for funding versus Colorado.
Yeah, Sean, I think for the Q&A, maybe what I'll do is I'll go find that graph and put it on screen. Uh, so Brian Farley is our colleague out in Colorado. He handles reserve studies in the Rocky Mountains, and him and I gave a presentation to a management company that sits in both states, and it was to their board members. And Colorado has just passed its first state law as far as like reserve studies and requirements go, and it's only for developers. So when a developer develops out a community and then transfers it over to the owners of the community, so the homeowners, it needs to have a professional reserve study completed. And so that just went into place like weeks ago. And so his array looked much different than ours. The biggest spike was between 0 and 10%, so by far. And the average funding level was 27, 26%, and 60%, so almost two-thirds of his community associations he works with were significantly underfunded. So it just shows you that we have a very mature um, condo client base here in California. And I think a lot of states do actually look to our legislation to enact within their states to encourage this positive, healthy kind of financial environment for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so lending, so kind of hot off the presses as well, Fannie and Freddie. Um, so they have some new requirements. There was a requirement of 10% of the annual budget must go towards reserves. And that changed, or it's going to change as of January 2027. I think it's January 4th. And the requirement is that they need to set aside at least 15%. Um, John, how do you feel about that number?
You know what? Again, I think that it, I think it's not going to really affect a lot of our clients. A lot of our clients are already there. So I'm glad that again, the 15%, most of our clients are already there. And as you have on the screen, in practice, most associations are between 15 and 45%. So we're right over the right target. My bigger relief on that Fannie and Freddie are paying attention to this is that it's going to start getting associations to try to push up that percent funded, start really focusing on doing proper reserve funding, which I think is gonna be good all the way around. It's gonna really kind of boost the better run the communities, the better real estate's gonna be, everything's gonna get better. So I think this is a positive development. I think most of our clients are gonna be unfazed by it.
Yeah, in our experience, associations need to set aside at least 15%, but closer to like 30 or 45%
Yeah.
needs to go towards reserves. Um, and this is for condo associations only, not PUDs or single family home communities. But yeah, it's expensive to maintain a condo association. You got siding, you got roofs, a lot of them have pools, asphalt. If there's any kind of mechanical system at their site, then those are also expensive. Sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars, even millions of dollars. So
Yeah, it's funny that I remember being a kid in the 80s and the thought was condo living was cheap, and condo living's not cheap. It's just that the funds are spread out more. So it kind of feels cheap in the beginning, but the costs are the costs. And so they're kind of baked in the cake there.
yeah, I think about condos and the way they perform and how much they cost. There are some efficiencies that we're not really hitting on. If it's stacked development, one roof supports, a number of units beneath it, so only you need to pay for one roof kind of thing. Or if you're kind of smashed together, you got common walls, so there's some efficiencies there. But at the same time, just owning property is expensive.
Yes. And you know what? It's funny, just a little tangent there is I live in a single family home, not in an association. And I do put aside money in reserves for my roof, my painting. But my chances of special assessment are much higher as a single family home because things just sneak up on you. Whereas at least with condominium, because if I have to replace a roof, I've got to write a check for it, right? And for the most part, we've seen some nightmare special assessments, but most special assessments, I mean, they're painful, but if I have to replace my roof, it's going to cost me about $50,000. So I've got to write a check for $50,000. A lot of the times, a special assessment for a new roof in an association is going to be about $10,000. So there is some benefits to condo living that we don't have as single family homeowners.
Yeah, yeah, great point. Just a little bit more on Fannie and Freddie. So the limited review of what Fannie and Freddie need to make sure a condo association would comply, it's going away. So my understanding is about two-thirds of condo associations were able to use this limited review. So that's going to go away and they want to do a full review. And so they're going to start asking for things more. It goes beyond reserves. It's things like insurance and the total operating budget for the community. And there's other requirements, but they're going to start asking for reserve studies and they're going to need it to be completed within the last 36 months. And I think they're going to need a site visit completed within the last 36 months. And the reason why this one's kind of interesting, not necessarily for us, Sean, because we're in California, they need to do a reserve study every 3 years, a site visit. But there's other states that refer to it as 5 years, like Nevada.
Yeah.
So Fannie and Freddie's trumping what the state law says. They're like, nah, you got to do it every 3 years. I just found that very interesting.
Well, and that might not be a bad thing. One of the things that, again, going back to our discussion of Colorado versus California is California has a very mature condo, rule environment, stuff like that. What Fannie and Freddie are doing is imposing that on the rest of the country. And, it goes back to the old saying, when California sneezes, the whole country gets cold. This is a good cold for the country to have. It's good that associations, they need to do a site inspection every 3 years. They need to do, again, California's done a very good job of creating a very good association environment.
Yeah, and there's requirements to make sure that it's a reserve professional, an engineer or a CPA, someone that's um, practices in this area. So, it's kind of taking it out of the hands of maybe the treasurer that's continuously done it. And Sean, you and I know that we love working with the treasurer. We'll kind of give them the keys. We just need to make sure that they stay on the roadway, when we're working with them, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. It should be a partnership, but you and I we're professionals and we can give people really educated uh, well, we can give educated recommendations. A lot of times, if you're just a treasurer and you're doing an update yourself to the numbers, there's some wishful thinking that goes in there. So it's better to partner together and create a great future together.
I don't know how many times I've heard, from the president or the treasurer, or maybe it's a new board member. Usually that's the case. They say, "Oh, my uncle is in the roofing business. He says
Yeah.
the roof will cost $5 a square foot." And I just kind of
Yes.
smile and I said, "Well, he did his work in the HOA business. The price is a little bit different." And kind of let him down easy, but the roofs are definitely 10, 15, $20 a square foot.
Yes.
And we know that. And it's dependent on a few different things. But we were able to understand what it costs, a similar community, and make sure that we put the number in there correctly.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah. The other thing Fannie and Freddie are looking to do is make sure that you're on top of deferred maintenance. And so they're going to use the reserve study to help identify maybe what some of those needs might be. So just something to think about, if something's past due and you're not taking care of it. Um, in addition to the reserve study, they're going to look to subject matter experts that might already be working with you at your community. I had a project up in Lake Tahoe, and there's some stairway walkways that kind of go up to the second floor, second level, and they get a lot of snow, and so these stairways are rotted out. They're unsafe actually, and so they got flagged for having deferred maintenance. They don't have the money either to take care of it. And so Fannie and Freddie, they have a blacklist, and they got put on the blacklist. And
Mm.
so once you get put on the blacklist, this is a big problem because then you can't get financing to sell units within your development. And so, Sean, what do you think that does to, overall real estate values?
Just craters it. Yeah, it's a nightmare scenario.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, and so back to Sean and I, we want to make sure that you're funding adequately and appropriately. The numbers behind that are um, insignificant when you think about, the overall value of your home and maybe not being able to sell it because there's no lending available, So um, just try to make the point that like, if you're actively funding correctly, you're going to put yourself, your community, in the best position possible to successfully navigate moving forward.
Yep, agreed.
All right, so let's close this out here. So what this means for your reserve study. There's new mandates coming on. We're going to need to add components and adjust cost. There's things like inspections and infrastructure repairs, turf conversions. Just communicate to your reserve analyst as early as possible. Work with us. We're a team. We're going to make sure that we have everything set up appropriately within your study. And it will be appropriate for that year, but we'll revisit it the next year and things might need to change. But we'll make those adjustments as needed. You're going to want to update your study so that the scope, useful life, funding reflect today's legal landscape. You're going to want to build funding flexibility for emergencies. And Sean, how do we kind of do that? How do we build up flexibility for these emergencies?
Well, we got to be well funded, right? If we got to be working towards that 70% funded level. That's going to get us in a strong position, working towards 100% funded. Because so a lot of it, as you and I both know, a lot of our clients that were 20% funded in 2020 when everybody got hit with the new balcony bill, everything like that, they got caught, on their, flat on their feet. But those communities that were 70+% funded had a lot more flexibility. They were able to pay for the inspections, they were able to pay for the repairs, they were able to do so without special assessments. So the better funded you are, the more prepared you're going to be, and the more flexible you'll be, and be able to navigate the storm that'll come at you.
Yeah, yeah. So you're just kind of managing your risk by being funded accordingly, 70% funded, 100% funded. That helps you deal with some of these emergency repairs or new line items that need to come online within your study. And then lastly, just partner with us and do it early. We have some seasonality to our work. So get us the information early, understand what some of these legal deadlines are for compliance, actively get bids, look into rebates, and just kind of manage the project as early as possible because what that does is just saves you money.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, Paige. Well, that kind of wraps up our presentation. We want to just open it up for Q&A.
Yeah, so we had a lot of great questions coming in. As a reminder, we're going to try to get to as many as time allows. So let's dive in here. All right, on SB 326, our first inspection gave us a report with live times on each balcony. So 23 needed repairs this year. Some had 5 years live, some had 29 years, etc. Do we work off that report, or do we have you get another inspection on the 9-year basis anyway?
Well, I would start building in those results into your reserve study now, and then work with when you have to do the next 9 year, that will certainly change. But I think it sounds like you've got a very good inspection that you could take the results of it and put it into the reserve study, uh, the findings into the reserve study, so that you have the years timed out of when you need those funds. So I would take the reserve or the balcony bill that you received, build it into the reserve, build the findings into the reserve study, fund for that, and then also beginning, obviously fund for the inspection that you got to get done in the next 9 years. And then when you get the next one in 9 years, then we're going to adjust the reserve study again.
All right. Is there a reason why common area utility repairs were not previously accommodated for in past reserve studies that now SB 900 is prompting this extra cost?
Well, a lot of it was the because it failed the National Reserve Study Standards tests regarding predictability, and for the most part, it was never a problem. This was honestly not something that I saw as being driven by need. In terms of nobody was saying, hey, we need to start funding for utilities. When there were utilities that needed to be funded for, they got in when they started to pass the National Reserve Study Standards test. So here in Orange County, I'm thinking especially about plumbing. You know, we all in everybody who lives south of Irvine knows you're going to get slab leaks. You're going to need to do plumbing repairs and replacement. So that those made their way into the reserve studies because it complied with National Reserve Study Standards. Stuff like electrical, stuff like that, just didn't, and so it did. That's why it didn't go in.
All right, we have some AB 1572 questions here. Will AB 1572 apply to existing irrigation installations or only greenfield? Meaning, will HOAs like ours be expected to rip out existing potable mains with purple water main for irrigation purposes?
It's my understanding that that's another way to be compliant. So if you have this non-potable water system that's irrigating a turf field, then it's allowable. You would be able to continue to have that turf field within your community. Um, so it's just another way to kind of like comply with AB 1572.
All right, does AB 1572 apply to DG xeriscape as well as grass?
I don't believe so because DG and Xeriscape doesn't use any irrigation.
All
Yeah.
right. Has there been an official definition of non-functional turf in the context of a large HOA where turf lies adjacent to residents, just like it does in normal city residential neighborhoods?
So I've heard a couple of attorneys talk about it that if you walk on it, it's functional turf. That's pretty loose interpretation. I don't think there has been a definitive definition yet that I've heard. Have you heard anything, Derek?
I think if I follow the question correctly too, if it's someone's front yard, it's allowable. Like you don't necessarily need to convert that type of turf, but it's common area within community associations. Just think of a lot like a big grass lawn that's common area.
Yeah.
The one thing I teased the audience with was Colorado numbers. That's on screen here. I found it. You can see here that the largest spike is 0 to 10% funded, and their average funding level is about 29% funded, and 60% of their community associations are underfunded.
All right. Thanks for sharing that. Okay. Does this reserve funding reform kind of directly conflict with the SB 1007 restrictions on 8% increase cap?
Well, that's what we kind of talked about in that previous slide. But yeah, there's some inherent contradictions there. So because they're capping it, but then they're saying you've got to fund for this, and even though there's a cap, now you've got a special assessment that you could use, stuff like that. So yeah, there's some contradictions there, and so hopefully the cap will go away and we don't have to worry about it. But yeah, there's some inherent contradictions there.
Yeah, John, I just want to point out that in our presentation we pointed it out, but there already is a cap. It's 20%.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, they just want to lower the cap. They want to lower it to 8%. And that would really restrict what Sean and I do for our community association clients.
All right, AB 2050. Has anyone said what the minimum funding would be? 10% or 50% of what the study recommends?
I think the minimum funding is the alternate funding range that we talk about with just making sure that the association stays cash positive.
Yeah, it's considered a threshold 0% funding level. So it's the minimum to take care of all of your financial requirements per the component list. But then just also know and understand that Sean and I talked a lot about today about new legislation, new rules coming online, and these studies being living, breathing documents. In my experience, more things come online that are needed moving forward than come offline. So if you're funding at a minimum 0% uh, funding model, then you're not going to be prepared for the things that you don't know about already.
All right. In your experience, does reserve funding levels affect market values?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. I used to do um, a webinar about how you could take communities. Basically, we found that it's a community that's well funded, above 70% funded, it can get about 12% more on their value of their home than communities that are below 30% funded. We did a test here in Orange County where two communities very similar. One was 100% funded, one was 12% funded, and it went across the board. The values in the community, in same town, same builder, same everything, 12% higher. So yeah, definitely it ties in. It definitely affects your the price of your home.
Yeah, we just look to break it down on a per square foot basis. So if you're looking at what a 2 unit building condo goes for versus a one, that's the way we were breaking it down, just on a per square foot basis. And I'll just add that like curb appeal is real, So if you have adequate funding and you're able to take care of your projects on time, then your community association not only is not going to have deferred maintenance, but it's going to look better right away.
All right. If AB 2050 becomes law, please confirm that a special assessment can be implemented without a homeowner vote. I think this is what I heard from the presenters.
Yeah, it would give the board power to pass a special assessment without a vote if it's needed.
All right. How much should a PUD be setting aside for reserves?
Matters on the assets that the PUD has. That if Because remember, we don't look at it and just go, well, this is a PUD, so therefore their monthly reserve contribution should be $1,000. We look at it and say, what amenities do they have? What common area assets do they have? What's the useful life, remaining life and cost? What's the deterioration rate of those components? Then we use that deterioration rate to create the anticipated monthly reserve contribution. So we would have to know more of um, what's at the community.
And I have a community in Arinda, Lafayette. It's a single family home community. It's got 6 pools, tennis club, a clubhouse that's associated with that tennis club. So those assets are much different than a PUD, a single family home community that has no gated system. It just has a sign, a couple of mailbox kiosks and some asphalt, so it depends.
Yeah, every association is a snowflake. They're all different.
All right. Would SB 900 apply to an HOA with single family dwellings and that has a CCR clause stipulating homeowners are responsible for all utility line maintenance and repairs?
It's my understanding that SB 900 is applicable to single family home communities too.
All right. All right. To clarify, the special assessment override would only be applicable for reserves, though, right? So if 1007 passes, the board couldn't do the special override, but then apply some of it to the operating expenses too?
I think we just don't know. I think
Yeah.
these are pending and we wanted to talk about them. And it sounds like 1007 is losing steam. I don't know. If they both passed, we'd have to talk again. We have to come back together.
Yeah, we'll do another webinar about it as soon as we get more clarity on that.
Okay, perfect. We have time for one final question here. Question is regarding AB 1572. Our property has a large park on a drip system and a green belt with trees. Does that mean we have to stop watering? This is the first time I've heard of this law.
I think you would need to work with a subject matter expert, like a landscaping team, to understand whether or not you need to be compliant with it. To Sean's point, he said if you put feet on the turf, then it has some kind of function. I've heard similar about trees within, a large green belt. They got trees, and so the green area is supporting the trees. There's different arguments. I'm just trying to point you in the right direction. Get your subject matter expert, your landscaping team involved to understand what your needs are there.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Derek and Sean. That concludes our webinar. If anyone is interested in a recorded version of this or any other webinar, you can search for them on YouTube or on the Association Reserve's webinars page. If you enjoyed today's session and would like to receive the Association Reserve's newsletter or announcements of future webinars, please visit www.reservestudy.com and click the icon at the bottom of the page to sign up for the newsletter. As a reminder, certificates of completion will be emailed out within 1 week. We will also email out a link to this recording and a copy of the slides. I want to thank you all for attending. If you have any questions or if there's any way we can be of service to you, please don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you again. Goodbye.